Hello and welcome to Chaos Tournaments. I'm Fetch, and today I'm with ThunderDown, otherwise known as Tyler, the winner of Lotus 2. So, Tyler, ThunderDown, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself? Tell us about, because I don't really know much about you as a player. I haven't really seen you much around. So,
Yeah, thanks for having me. Uh, that's haven't really been much into the online scene. I think this is like my third online tournament. But I do mostly local events. I live in Pacific Northwest Washington area, so we usually have
mm,
like a different event every month. Um,
mhm.
so I've been doing CEDH events for maybe a couple of years now, at least something like that. Um, but mostly just like I said, in person. This is my second. Um, I think I did Mox Masters once. Didn't do very well in that. I think I went like 0 wins. This is my Lotus, and then I did one where we had it was like just I can't remember exactly what it's just people from all over the Pacific Northwest for Surfside. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that one, but it's Eminence event. They did like a qualifier for Surfside. Um,
Okay, I don't think I heard of that one, but
yeah, that was an online event that I did pretty decent in top four and got the entry to Surfside. That's pretty much my history for like online events, but otherwise I do just the in-person events.
well, happy to see you break through in a big online event like this. What got you into CEH? I mean, you said you've been playing for a few years, so.
Yeah, initially I was playing with just friends, kitchen tables type stuff, and they just kind of died down. We were just playing regular EDH, so I was looking to start heading to my LGS. I thought I always like to go to like tournaments with like the pre-releases and stuff like that. So I
Mhm.
thought, can I start doing that with my EDH decks? Because I was just trying to expand some more. Friends weren't too into that, so I just kind of did it solo. And I came up upon a CDH event, and I was like, I'm gonna start researching this. It seemed kind of interesting. I gave it my first shot. I liked playing the faster style decks, so that was kind of my intro, just
Mhm.
looking into what decks were good. And I found out that I really liked the CDH type decks, and since it was my only really way to play initially, that's kind of what really got me into it.
Nice. I mean, obviously you're bringing not exactly a deck known for its speed with Derevi, so what process made you get that transition from going for fast turbo decks and then leading into Derevi being a much more control-y style?
Sure, sure. I guess I'm not. I guess in a general of turbo sense, maybe I misworded that not properly. I don't. I don't really play turbo decks too often. I'm definitely more of a mid-range player.
Mm.
But Derevi in general, um, I gotta give like a little bit of a shout out to Comedian because I saw his list.
Mm.
I was brewing my own list within the like 3 months or so. I was kind of brewing my own list, and I saw his list, and I was like, he does pretty well in tournaments. He's probably better than me. I don't really do too many decks, brew my own decks too often. So I took his deck, and I was missing a couple of my own pieces. So I just or some of the pieces that he had, I didn't have the actual card, and I didn't want to print them out as a weird different proxy. So that's how you can kind of see there's a couple differences in our list, mostly for that reason. But Derevi as a card just kind of really fits my playstyle. I like being able to cast a spell and then still have mana up to try to interact with the board. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just kind of exactly what Derevi does. But as for, I don't know, he can definitely be a turbo side, but like I said, I'm kind of more of a mid range player.
Well, I think you mentioned comedian. Comedian really showing a lot of people Derevi has recently gotten some pieces that's made it pretty spooky. One Ring being the most notable of them.
Right, right, yeah. They definitely turned the deck into a much more formidable competitor with the One Ring, just because I think we saw in my match it drew me a lot of cards.
Mm-hmm. You're saying how this deck really matches your style and really falls into what you like to play. What do you feel like are some highlights for the deck? Some key cards, some stuff you want to bring out. Either that are more specific to you or just for the deck in general?
I think some highlights are just like any of the cards that can produce like a bunch of mana. I guess Chromatic Orrery in general is probably the number one. Excuse me, that I would highlight. Chromatic Orrery just does like everything. It produces 5 mana initially, and then you can just immediately tap it, go to combat, untap it, and it's like you didn't even pay it. It's like you're up 3 mana, where most
Mhm.
cards, you really aren't getting that much of a payback. Even like Soul Ring, I think if you untap it, you're only up like what 2 mana? Maybe it's three. I make my math wrong. But that's definitely like a really card I'd like to highlight. I think that's a new addition to the deck. Maybe I haven't seen too many of the lists that are not just like straight up stacks lists, but other than that, I'd say the One Ring, of course, is very good, and it seems like
Mhm.
people are starting to play more Transmute Artifact just for in order to get that card out. Anything that can search for artifacts in general. Yeah,
Well, and Chromatic Orrery also being a combo outlet is huge for it as well.
yeah, definitely. Since the fact that you can even just use it to draw the cards. A lot of issues with other combo pieces is it just only produces mana. Even with the Emil, Derevi, and Gaia's Cradle, all you have is mana. You still have to find something to draw the cards, but Chromatic Ore just kind of does it all.
I mean, makes a lot of sense. Uh, I also wanted to ask you about your thoughts on Teferi Mage of Zalfir, creature card that for a long time didn't see any play and recently has seen an uptick, and I see you're including it in your list.
Yeah, so that was kind of like just a last minute inclusion. I was kind of looking through my cards and I saw Teferi there, and I've always thought about it in the back of my mind of just like instant speed silence. That seems just very good in general if you're
Mhm.
playing the long game. I think most people exclude it from their deck just because it's not going to, like, if you cast it on turn two, something similar turn three, it's just going to sit there and kind of give your opponents a silence. But if you have it out in the late game, it's kind of just like a instant speed win con essentially because you can flash it in on end step.
Mhm.
If it gets countered, well, you just baited out a bunch of counter spells, and now you go onto your turn, untap everything, um, and then go for the win anyways. But I definitely am still kind of testing out that card. In the combat step tournament that just happened, I think last week, I actually took the Teferi out, um,
Oh,
and I replaced it with Roaming Throne, which performed pretty well. But I don't know if I still think Teferi is a pretty good card. I like it in general. Um, it
very nice.
seems to serve its purpose pretty well.
Well, and I think this deck can probably utilize it better than most just because mana comes pretty easily.
Right. And even in the end, if it has to be a 3/4 attacker for Teferi, there's not too many cards that can block that
Mhm.
in general.
Yeah. I mean, the deck is pretty straightforward in what it's trying to do, uh, but it does have a lot of flexibility as far as how you get there. Are there any tips that you'd have for someone picking up the deck?
Yeah, so I guess the tips that I'd say is just what I started doing with the deck is I always prioritized getting out early mana production, whether that be like Bloom Tender or just obviously there's artifacts in general. But beyond that, you gotta really think about your tutors because there's gonna be a lot of games where like you can only really have one tutor, and that needs to be super impactful. Otherwise, it's just you're just kind of get dead in the water.
Hmm.
Like for example, one of my games I tutored for super early in the game. I tutored for the Bloom Tender because, like I said, I wanted to prioritize the mana. But I just kept drawing land and artifact after artifact and land. So that was my only tutor in hand. And had I just maybe waited an extra turn to tutor for maybe like a Captain Sisay in order to get all the other cards, the game probably would have ended much differently. But being able to figure out what to tutor for in this deck specifically, I think is much more important than in say like if you're playing a deck that has access to black,
Yeah.
because the tutors are pretty restrictive in general of almost only creatures or artifacts. You don't have the flexibility of getting anything in your deck, so
Hmm.
you really got to think about that at all times. Is this really what you're trying to tutor for? I'd say that's probably the most important part.
Yeah. Yeah, as you mentioned, missing out on black makes it a big deal, and the fact that Derevi, while huge value piece, not something like Rocco where it's a tutor engine or something that gives you innate card draw. You need another card to enable it.
Right, exactly.
Any decks or strategies that you feel like you have a hard time with? Anything that you sit down at the table and you're like, ooh, I'm not happy about that being there?
Um, I haven't had any that I've specifically played with this deck recently. I have. There's one deck in general, just like Rog Tevish. That's like the bane of my existence. Anyone who plays that deck, I hope you don't
Yeah.
play that deck. But I've luckily not had to play versus any of those decks recently. Um, there wasn't really any deck that when I went up into the tournament and faced, I was like, oh, this is going to be a hard deck to really face, because I feel like Derevi can kind of get around a lot of the issues that most decks are presenting today. You know, doesn't Dranith doesn't do anything to us. If people are playing Artifact Hate, we have like a lot of creatures type um, mana producers. The biggest issue I would say is like creature activated ability hate. The
Mm-hmm.
deck kind of just folds to that. At least from what I've gathered, I haven't had to like navigate that too often. But I'd say that's definitely the highest issue with the deck. Is if you see a deck that can run those, you might want to try to keep an eye out on those and focus that down.
Makes sense. Before we move on any further, uh, one other card that I wanted to ask about, Agatha's Soul Cauldron. Obviously, powerhouse of a card, shown a lot of its uses. What do you
Mhm.
prioritize with it for this deck? Because it's a really flexible card.
Right, so I haven't actually been able to use the card to like its fullest extent, in my own opinion. But I think mostly the idea behind it is it's kind of like a backup for your combos. Let's say someone kills your Derevi, or sorry, kills your Emil. You can exile the Emil, put it the counter onto a creature. Now you have Emil again, or any of the other creatures that have activated abilities. Um, on top of that, it's just kind of like a really good breach hate piece that can stop just any of the like breach decks in the format. And then you can always just get the stray ranger captains in the bins sometimes. Just randomly pick one of those out, and now you have a silence for your turn. But that card's definitely like kind of like 50-50 to me. Like sometimes it'll overperform, and then other times it'll just sit in my hand, and then I end up discarding it to hand size because it's not doing anything for me.
Makes sense. No innate combos, just a whole lot of utility for it. Still
Yeah,
a
I mean,
powerful
if
card though.
it is
Yeah.
possible, if there's like an actual combo piece with it, I may have just like missed over like looked over it, but if someone finds it, I would love to hear, just to kind of improve myself.
I mean, I'm sure if someone knows about it, they'll say it in the comments and we can learn that together.
Yeah, for sure.
Are there any last things you're wanting to talk about, either for the deck or otherwise?
Um, I just like to say like I think people can definitely have fun with the deck. It's I wouldn't say it's like top tier or anything like that, but it can definitely catch some people off guard. I have a lot of fun playing with it, so test it out if you think that's something that you'd like. Um, that's about it.
Yeah. I mean, being in three colors, you certainly have some limiters on it, but Derevi really been showing its stuff recently, and happy that you could take it to a win.
Yeah, I was real surprised. I mean, this was the very first tournament that I played with the deck, and honestly, I was just hoping for top 16, and then just kind of kept going with it. I was like, okay, let's do this. And I'd like to shout out to all the to the players in the last final top four match. That was a pretty crazy match, and all the players in it were great.
Well, happy you got that win. Uh, I look forward to seeing if you continue to show up in these online tournaments, as well as any in your locals. I wish you the best of luck there.
Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for coming on and doing this interview. Any last shout outs or any last thing you want to say?
No, just shout out to all the tournament organizers, online and in person. The game probably wouldn't really be existing without you guys. I appreciate all the content creators as well. I love watching CDH stuff, especially with like chaos tournaments and whatnot as well. So thank you to you guys.
Yeah. Thank you to all of our watchers. Thank you to the patrons who make this possible. And I just want to say I'm very happy we could have someone make the jump from in person to online and have such success. Uh, Fills me with hope for the future of our format.
Right, right. Yeah, definitely want to say to people who are like thinking about the online tournament scene with all like the kind of issues that have been recently coming up and whatnot. Um, Most games you're not going to run into any sort of like concerns whatsoever. It's just going to be a normal game of Magic, just kind of sitting at your own home. So definitely give it a shot. I was pleasantly surprised with my own results, and everyone that I ever played with are all super great people. I don't think anyone. I think the very large majority of players are in the same boat. They're just kind of there to have fun. They just want to play the game, and so um, I'm hoping that we can continue the online tournaments.
Uh, I certainly have no plans of us stopping, so I hope we see you and all of our viewers at our next event.
Thank you, thank you.
Bye.
See ya.